Formula One can take a turn for the worse in just a matter of seconds. From cars spinning out of control to epic collisions, today we'll talk about the worst of the lot that happened in 2022, starting with Lando Norris. McLaren struggled big time last season in F1.
A big left turn, and whilst that looks spectacular, the good news is that the energy dissipated over 200 meters.
Both their drivers just couldn't find their best form last season, but Norris struggled a bit more with one particular thing: keeping the car on the track. We saw in many races that Norris was constantly running off the track in his car, but in Miami, he was caught napping once again. This time, he took a weird decision, a decision that a lot of people question afterward. On lap 41 of the Miami Grand Prix, Norris was in between overtaking Pierre Gasly of AlphaTauri with so much space on one side of the track, you'd think Norris would easily make it. But nah, nothing's easy when it comes to Lando. He was driving so closely to Gasly's car that his rear wheel clipped Gasly's front wheel and his car spun. And it spun a few times. His rear right tire even came off from the rim, started running a race of its own.
Down the hill, and then it's, because of the tethers on the wheels, the car starts tripping over its own wheel. The tethers are there to stop the wheel.
Thankfully, his car didn't run into the barricade. Otherwise, things could have been a lot worse. And the good thing was that he wasn't injured at all. Decisions like those just sum up McLaren's whole 2022 campaign. And speaking of bad decision making, here's someone you'd never expect bad decisions from: Charles Leclerc. Don't expect silly mistakes like these from a driver like him. But sometimes, even the best of us make mistakes. Ferrari's 2022 campaign was full of ups and downs. Bad luck, bad decision-making, and bad strategy all came in the way of Ferrari after they had a spectacular start to the campaign. And especially Leclerc, he had a great start, and it looked like he was gonna fight for the championship, but that didn't happen.
Gradation, it's gone in hard. I'm surprised he wasn't able to reverse out, actually. He's obviously been stuck under the tyres.
Well, it's like you're on ice at this stage. There's no way he's going to stop that.
But mistakes like these are what cost Ferrari last season. It was the 19th lap of the French Grand Prix. Leclerc was leading the way throughout after starting from the front of the grid. He was looking very comfortable in the race. It looked like he would give the Ferrari fans something to cheer about, only he didn't. Cornering is an art form in Formula One.
In Monaco and dream of...
Oh no, I say that! I've done it! He's gone off at Rascasse, poor lad.
Goodness me. Poor Charles Leclerc has...
One teeny tiny mistake and you're straight into the barricade. That's exactly what happened to Leclerc at that moment. He pushed the throttle a little too hard while exiting the corner and his car spun. It spun and went straight into the barricades. The race was over for him, and worse, it was the third time in 2022 that Leclerc was leading a race but couldn't finish it. Terrible. And while we're on the topic of bad luck, the next driver was surrounded by a whole lot of it. Sebastian Vettel. This guy's luck wasn't doing him any favors at the start of the 2022 campaign.
With track temperatures in excess of 60 degrees, Vettel and Ferrari played it cool, staying out while both Mercedes pitted under an early safety car.
At first, he was suffering from COVID-19 and missed the first two races of the year. Poor Seb. He came back in the third round of the season, the Australian Grand Prix. But it wasn't an easy return at all for the four-time world champion. His Aston Martin was showing zero signs of pace, which clearly frustrated Seb during the race. And that's not it. Seb was also struggling to keep his Aston Martin under control throughout the race. Things were seriously wrong with that car in Australia, but it came to a halt in the 24th lap of the race. While making a sharp turn, Seb hit his car a little too hard on the curb. A car that was already going through so many problems just couldn't handle one more and lost it. The car spun, went into the barricade, and that was it.
Sebastian Vettel, he has been leading almost from start to finish, but now he's out of this race.
Seb's race was over. As many high hopes he had upon his return to F1 after COVID were all destroyed. He said one thing to his team after the crash though. Seb said that the car needs an urgent upgrade. Yikes. At least Seb's crash was on a track full of other cars. The next driver managed to crash his car on an empty one, Mick Schumacher. Mick's dad was a sensational driver, one of the greatest without a doubt. But Mick, he's nothing like his dad, at least not yet. And this clearly shows whenever he's on the track. He's a really good driver, no doubt about that, but he still has a long way to go. In the qualifying session of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Mick had a nightmare. Haas was showing some good signs of pace early on in the season. Mick was out on his lap trying to push the car as hard as he can, but then, with just 5 minutes remaining in Q2, Mick lost control of the car. He went over a curb at such a high speed that the car lost its balance.
Fast you were at that point, the potential not just in the car but in yourself. How great were you feeling up to that point? Do you think Q3 was there within your reach?
Q3 was, I think.
The car spun and went towards the wall and crashed heavily into it. It was a scary crash. The car was completely totaled from one side, but thankfully Mick was okay. He made it out of the car in one piece, and that's the most important thing. That crash was just horrifying to look at. Yes, it was a scary crash, but at least in this one, the car was in one piece, which wasn't the case when he crashed in Monaco. Driving in the streets of Monaco is never a piece of cake. You can never take your eyes off the track, not even for a millisecond. The moment you lose your concentration or you make one little mistake with your car, you'll be straight into the wall. And that's what happened with Mick when he was blazing around his car in Monaco. Mick was already not having a good time in that race, and the crash just made it worse. On lap 28 of the race, Mick lost the rear end of his car. He was entering the swimming pool chicane at high speed, and the car just skidded off the track and went straight into the wall. Not right away though, it went into the wall after spinning a few times, and the impact was so heavy that the car was cut into 2 pieces. Thankfully, it was the rear end of the car that got separated, and Mick was completely okay. It was horrific. You'd be thinking this has to be the scariest crash of 2022, but it's not. There's still one to go. Remember when Zhou Guanyu went upside down? Like, Formula One crashes hardly ever get scarier than this one.
Luckily, it lost a little bit of speed, going round and round and round into the gravel. As I said, it's always concerning them because you roll over hoop, digs into the gravel. We're told we're only seeing these replays.
This could easily be in the top 10 most horrifying crashes of all time. It was the British Grand Prix. The lights just went out when a car went upside down and went straight into the barricade. And believe me, it was on the first corner of the first lap. George Russell of Mercedes was right behind Zhou. Pierre Gasly clipped the rear wheel of Russell's car, and Russell just went straight into the back of Zhou's Alfa Romeo.
Into the catch fencing, so he was actually, Martin, upside down, as you can see, and the roll hoop and the halo very much doing its job before the car.
The impact was so heavy that Zhou's car was instantly turned upside down. It glided on the road while being upside down and went straight into the barricade after flipping a couple of times. It was so scary to watch. The car just missed the people standing on that end of the track, otherwise it would have been a disaster. The halo on an F1 car saved Zhou's life. Surprisingly, he came out of the car without a single scratch. All hail Halo. That's all from my side. These were some of the worst crashes of 2022.
And you, Freddie Vasseur, the Alfa Romeo team principal there too.